Hey everybody, it's Dr. May. Today is Columbus Day 2023, and it's a beautiful day outside and hopefully a beautiful day to share this new skill with you. So this is about creating inner allies, which is a good coping resource you can use that's often talked about in the trauma world. But you don't necessarily have to have trauma to use this. Anybody could use this and requires no equipment except your imagination. So it's a very portable coping skill. And I'm going to pull this up for us here. So I was debating between calling it inner support people and inner allies, but I did hear the term inner allies from one of my resources, so I'm going to use that today. Okay, so let's do an intro a little bit. So first, a lot of times when we're going through something difficult, the hard part about it is that we're struggling alone, that we don't feel like we could connect with somebody in real life about this issue and get support. And if you think about some difficult times in your life, you might have felt even worse about the stress because you felt alone with it. So what you could do for inner allies is to kind of capitalize on some of the connections you've built over your lifetime, to bring them back to mind and to use them as a coping resource. So when we have interactions with people, whether it's our parents or friends or family or teachers or whoever, we tend to internalize those relationships. So we have a model in our mind that gets constructed about the way it feels like to be with that person, the kind of things the person says, the way they relate to us, the way we relate to them, and how we feel comforted perhaps by that person. So they're kind of like inner representations of people that we take with us. And what we can do is draw upon these inner relationships with these inner allies or inner people when we actually need them, when we could use a little more support, but maybe there's not an actual person available to us. And it could be a great source of comfort. So who could these inner allies be? Well, they could be people we actually know who are actually a part of our life. So that's probably the first place you would want to turn. So this could be people past or present. They could be friends, family, relatives, therapists, mentors, teachers, coworkers, coaches, anybody that makes sense to you, people you actually know or knew. And they could be alive or dead, doesn't even matter. The next one could be even public figures or celebrities. So people you haven't met, but you kind of feel like you have a relationship to them in some kind of a way because you've seen them on TV a lot, or maybe on YouTube a lot, or on a movie. So you kind of get a sense of what they're like just from watching them. And kind of you might get a sense of what they stand for, what their values are, or the kinds of things they would say to you if they were in your life. If you're a spiritual kind of a person, a spiritual figure could factor in as well. So you might think of, well, what would Jesus do? Sort of like that famous bumper sticker, or Buddha, or Muhammad, or Krishna, or angels, or spirit guides. Things like that could also can be considered an inner ally if that rings true for you, if that feels right. You can even think of fictional characters, whether from TV shows, movies, books, or other sources. For example, I put a picture of the Golden Girls. I like the Golden Girls a lot, and sometimes I imagine them being my inner allies. What would they say? What would it feel like to sit with them while I'm going through this? And sometimes that kind of shifts my mood or shifts the way I see a situation. It could even be fantasy people that you made up in your own imagination. It could be, if you're a writer, maybe you wrote some short stories or novels, or created a sort of comic strip or something with characters that you created, and those would be the inner allies you would take with you. It could even be dolls or sports, figurines or action figures from when you were a kid. Maybe if you pull those back into your life now, there's something about them or the way they would interact or the things that they would say to you that would help. So you could be pretty open about that if you like that. It even could be the wise aspect of your best self, of you. So some of the, therapies talk about, like, let's say, what would my wise mind say? If there was an embodied wise mind of me, what would that ally do for me now? Or what would my adult self do if I was, if I'm feeling kind of like childish right now or feeling kind of insecure, maybe there's that more mature part of me that I could pull back in to accompany me. So that would be like a healthy adult. In internal family systems, they talk about self with a capital S. So it's sort of like this wise mind figure that's part of yourself. It's not a part, it's like the bigger spiritual aspect of you that's kind of accompanying you in your situation that maybe you don't always have access to. But if you practice it, you'll get more access to your higher self. Okay, so these are some of the main options of inner allies, and you could use one or many of these. It's really up to you. So let's look at the roles that they could play. So these are just some suggestions, and obviously you could call upon some other roles as well, but some of the main ones, a protector. So someone that would accompany you and offer you protection from negative people or even negative emotions or influences. So it would almost help you set a boundary. Having the presence of that person would help you keep out some of the negative influences or help you gain the strength to set a boundary. A nurturer, so it would be like a nurturing figure that could offer you kindness or caring, compassion, forgiveness, and love when maybe you have a hard time bringing it up yourself. But imagining that person offering it to you could help you take it in. A wise figure, okay, so somebody who is calm, centered, experienced, full of wisdom, someone who could offer you suggestions or advice or feedback that would be helpful in a particular situation. Maybe you could remember some wise words that a real person said, or just get the vibe of a person that would help you gain that wisdom that you need, maybe help you make a good decision. Or again, you could pick out a completely different role or call it something that feels right to you. So maybe it's an inner parent or a friend or a coach, a therapist, a spiritual advisor, maybe even a jokester, maybe someone who comes along with a good sense of humor that puts a different spin on the situation and helps you feel differently about it and maybe laugh about it instead of take it so seriously. Or perhaps even a teacher, just something like that. But whatever feels right for you. All right, so getting started. Okay, so picking your allies. So it's good to practice these things when you're feeling relatively calm and you're not overly stressed. So to practice, we could practice under calmer circumstances. And then when we get good at it, we'll be better at pulling it out when we really need it, when we're stressed out. So start to think of maybe a person that you would want to start with to practice with. So if it's somebody you know in real life, try to pick somebody with whom you have a relatively uncomplicated relationship. So for example, some people you've had very good times with, but also some pretty bad times with. And so bringing up the good also at the same time starts to remind you of the bad. So that could be a complicated situation. Or if someone you had a very good relationship with, but is no longer in your life, thinking about them could feel good, but also make you feel sadness at the same time. So think about somebody that would mostly feel good and not bring up too many other painful feelings, because that might complicate the exercise. Okay, so use your best judgment about that. Okay, so here's a practice you could do. So, sit down, find a quiet space, and ask for this inner support person or ally to come forth. And just imagine that person there using your senses. So if you want to visualize, you can notice what they look like today. What's their appearance like? How are they dressed? What's the look in their eyes or the expression on their face? What are they doing? Are they standing? Are they sitting? Are they in the middle of an activity? Are they gesturing in a certain kind of way or moving in a certain kind of way? So see if you could picture that. After my other video about safe spaces, someone said, well, what if I'm not good at visualizing? Or I have aphantasia, they threw out a fancy term. That's okay. You could still use primarily the other senses to help you. Or you could use a visual aid such as a photo if that's something you would like to do. But it doesn't preclude you from using this exercise. Just try to adapt it to what feels comfortable for you, what you're able to do, okay? So smell. Sometimes a person has a familiar scent. Not necessarily like bad, like BO, but maybe, you know, they have a certain way that they smell you could remember if you're more of an olfactory kind of a person, and that could help bring this to life for you. So touch, maybe they're making physical contact with you, hopefully in an appropriate way, maybe holding your hand or putting a hand on your shoulder, maybe sitting very close, giving you a hug, if that's something you want to imagine. You could also feel that they're not touching you at all, and that's fine. Sound. So what does their voice sound like? Are they speaking? Are they humming even, or singing? What are they communicating to you? So try to bring it to life using these different kinds of senses. I didn't put taste unless you plan to kiss them or lick them, which is maybe not something you necessarily need to do. Okay. Also, you could imagine, is there something that they're bringing to you? Maybe there's a special object, or maybe even a dish of food or something that they're bringing to you that's meaningful. And also, kind of related to the senses in a certain way, what does it feel like to be in this person's presence? So how is their presence affecting you? Okay, so if you want to broaden the exercise, you could start to establish an inner support team if that's something that you think would be helpful. So sometimes it feels good to have one person, but other times you could imagine yourself maybe in some kind of a healing circle with different support people of your choosing. So you could imagine, like, who would be there? How would they be positioned? Like, who would be sitting where in the circle, if it's a circle? And you could rearrange them until it feels right. If it helps, you could do a visual for yourself. You could make a collage of photos, or you could even just write their names in a certain kind of way to help you visualize this. And then observe what it feels like for you to be in this circle among these people. And then you could also imagine, what would they say to you, or what would they be doing that might be helpful? So is there any kind of advice they would give? Is there any comforting words? Is it just the way they're looking at you that would be helpful? Okay, and again, you can make any of this concrete and tangible to help with the exercise, because especially when you're stressed out, it's hard to really focus your mind. I know for sure for me, that's the case. And so you see all the PowerPoints I make, so making it concrete and tangible definitely can be helpful. So you could, you know, in advance, assemble some pictures, descriptions of the people that help you bring it to life. So even describing them using the different senses, or writing down the kind of things that they would say and do, that would be helpful to you. So if you can't imagine it because you can't get your head together in the moment, you could always maybe turn to that page in your journal, or turn to that document on your Word file on your computer, and bring these things back to mind when you need it, to help you get in the moment, visualizing your inner allies. And it's good to practice this daily if you can. Just even if you take a few minutes at some point in the day that feels right to you, and whether you need it or not, just to get used to doing this, get used to the feeling of bringing forth these inner allies. And this way, when you actually need it, they'll be more available. Okay, so troubleshooting. So if you're imagining an inner ally and something feels like it's missing or not quite right, think about, maybe is there something I need to communicate to them, or maybe is there something that I need to listen to that they're communicating to me, and see if there's a communication gap that could be healed. Other times, if it's maybe it's just not the right person for this moment, so you can look around and maybe another support person will appear, and that will be the right person, and they could maybe meet your need better by doing or saying just the right thing. So try to free your mind and see what else appears. And sometimes you'd be surprised, like something will come, or someone will come that will be a little bit better than the first person. And if you find that there's any inner person that starts to trigger you, like maybe it starts out good and then something comes up and all of a sudden it doesn't feel right, you could always kick them out, you know, or you could end the exercise. You don't have to stay with it if it's going bad. Okay, the idea is to make this a positive experience. So feel free to kick them out, like the guy's kicking the guy out the door in that little picture there. All right, so putting it into action. So these are the 4 categories that I think we could use these in, that like 4 major categories. There's probably other things maybe I'm not thinking of, but these are the 4, and then I'm going to flush these out in the next few slides. So one is If I'm currently feeling painful emotions or stressors or sensations, I can imagine the inner ally with me, helping me with that. So let's say I'm struggling with a problem and it's on my mind and I'm feeling upset about it. I could call forth an inner ally or allies to help me. Two, I'm actually in the world in a difficult situation. So I'm out there and I'm in action in the middle of something, and it'd be nice to have that inner ally present to help me out. Three, I'm preparing for a challenging situation, kind of like a cope ahead, as we would say in DBT. Or other times I could think about, this thing happened in my life and I'm not happy with how it turned out. I wish I could go back in time and do it differently. And perhaps if I had an inner ally with me, I could redo that situation. So that would be a fourth scenario. So let's go into some more detail here. So scenario one, so I'm currently feeling some painful emotions, experiences, physical sensations. So I could call forth an ally or allies and just try to share with them what I want to tell them about my problem. And this could be in words, or it could be in some other kind of nonverbal or energetic way. Like maybe I'm showing them a scene of something, or maybe I'm conveying a feeling and they're absorbing my feeling so they get what I'm going through. Then I could listen to how the person responds in whatever way they respond to me. And I could continue to dialogue and then notice what it feels like as I'm dialoguing with this person or people. It could be the circle. And see how it feels, if it feels different as I'm starting to experience the help that they're offering me. And if I'd like to make it more concrete, I could certainly write down the dialogue and try not to push it. Just see what comes to you rather than over intellectualizing this exercise. So try not to make it too left brain, make it a little bit more imaginative and right brain, because then it'll come more from your instincts, from your intuition. Okay. And maybe there's a few key takeaways from that encounter that you want to write down, even if you don't do the whole dialogue, and that would be important. Okay, so scenario two, so I'm actually out in the world struggling a little bit. So this picture I found, so there's a girl in the center in a green shirt, and she's in the middle of, let's say, a social gathering and feeling some discomfort here. So perhaps if she imagined an inner ally was with her, she'd be able to navigate that social situation with a little bit more assertiveness or confidence, or maybe less anxiety to get through it. So that would be just an example of that. So if you're in that situation, okay, I could bring up my inner ally now. Where are they standing? What are they saying to me? How am I feeling differently with them with me? And then see how the situation goes and how I'm benefiting from their wisdom or protection or nurturance. All right, so scenario three, planning ahead. So let's say I know something's going to come up later this week that might potentially be stressful. Maybe it's a difficult meeting at work. Maybe it's a family gathering for a holiday, which could be a little stressful. Perhaps I have to have a doctor's appointment that I'm nervous about, whatever it happens to be. So I could imagine going through that situation and try to sculpt it in a positive direction by imagining my inner ally with me. And how would that make a difference in how I dealt with the situation? And I could practice that in my mind, and maybe it'll make me get some ideas about how to cope. And then when I actually get there, kind of like scenario two, I could then also imagine the inner ally with me if I choose. All right, and finally, scenario four, going back to try to heal a past situation. So it was really hard to find a graphic for this one. So this looks like something from Christmas Carol with Ebenezer Scrooge and Isabella, I believe the name would be. So going back in time and redoing it with your current self, with your new understandings, and with an inner ally to make you feel differently or to help you deal with it differently. And when you imagine these things and you practice it, it almost starts to heal the old situation. It kind of reestablishes the memory in a new way and makes you feel differently about it. So they suggest this as a strategy for coping with trauma, actually. So if you're comfortable doing that, you don't have to pick the worst situation, pick something mildly stressful and see how it feels and experiment. So go back in the scene with a certain support person or people and imagine handling it differently or feeling differently, or how that person would help you. Maybe they would ward off the bad people and help you get through it. Imagine a different outcome that would feel better, and maybe some lessons that you could take away that would help you in the future. All right, so just wanted to give some credit to some of the references I used here. The main one I used was Joanne Twombly, Trauma and Dissociation Informed Internal Family Systems. Very good book. And also a few ideas from the Coping with Trauma-Related Dissociation. Also a good book. So, so that's where I got some of the ideas, plus some from my own imagination. All right, guys. Oops, stop the share. Sorry, lost the button for a minute. So hope that was useful to you. Give it a try, see what you think, and I'll see you soon. All right, have a good day, everybody. Take care now.